Well, I didn't even know that one could get into animation when I first came to know about it, because I had my education right up to my graduation in physics in Bangalore, and at that time animation as an industry or as a career option did not exist. So I had come to Bombay to continue my education in after BSc, to continue for a postgraduate course. But while I was looking for an opportunity, I came across an advertisement from the Government of India, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, that they were setting up a studio in Bombay, a cartoon film unit, and senior animator from Walt Disney Studio, Claire Weeks, was coming to train some people in India. Now I went just to meet Claire Weeks because I was interested in animation, because I had seen animation, Disney films of course, but I thought it was a good opportunity to meet him, so I did not have any hopes of getting into animation at that time, because I did not have an essential qualification for the training program, which was diploma or degree in fine arts or commercial art, applied arts. But I went and met Mr. Weeks anyway, and I showed him some of my work, which was essentially cartooning, which I had been practicing on my own. I was self-taught. But since Mr. Weeks thought it was good enough for me to apply, I did. And I finally got selected, and that is it. That's how I got into animation in 1956. That's 58 years ago, and have been in animation for the last more than 5 decades. Well, at that time it was a unique experience, because to me everything was new about it. I did not even know what a light box was, or how to use a light box to do the in-betweening and all that. Now, I had to learn the entire process from scratch. In fact, there were very few people around who, apart from Mr. Weeks himself, there was nobody else that could really guide me or teach me. But it was a good experience, because while working under Mr. Weeks on a pilot project, it was called Banyan Dia. It was a Jataka story, and that film that we were supposed to work on, and at the same time learn animation. And he was here for about 2.5 years. He was here up to 59. And during that period, I learned the fundamentals from him, the fundamentals of animation, that is classical animation, hand-drawn classical animation. And then I spent another 9 years in film studios, right up to 1968. I was in film studio in the same department, and while working on their productions in various capacities, like I started as a story illustrator, or making storyboard drawings, and then layouts, and I did all the stages of animation. It was quite a laborious process, and I learned all the various production processes during that time. And it took me almost that long, about 12 years, to become more confident about my abilities to make an animation film. Well, actually, it was a good thing that I started my animation career by doing what are essentially public service films. I mean, film division was meant actually, the cartoon film unit in film division was essentially a planned publicity program. It was about various programs being introduced by the 5-year plans, and how they were being implemented, and what were the benefits that people were getting at that time. And so I got more training in that aspect of social communication. And though later on I made a number of advertising films, very largely. After I left film division, I was in the private sector and I used to do mostly advertising films. But I returned to social communication with UNICEF. That was much later, that was actually 1990. And I found that that was where I had that is where I had a preference in my career, and I think that has really got me recognition, and also I had enjoyed enormously making these films. Well, there has been a lot of changes since then. Uh, Animation at that point when I started my career was an extremely laborious process, very slow and laborious, requiring hundreds and thousands of drawings to be made by hand, and it was always considered to be a slow, tedious, labor-intensive process. But we still enjoyed it because at the end of it, after all that labor, when you saw your own drawings coming to life on the screen, it was a great payoff. And, uh, and that was when we started. But later, gradually, the processes and tools and software are being introduced to make our life easier. And by the time I got to be more of an independent animation film director and filmmaker, I had switched over to some of these new tools like ink and paint programs and so on. And that eased the labor involved quite a lot. But still, I think essentially for me, animation has been the paper and pencil job. That is where I started. In fact, the creation of an animation film started the pre-production process of character designs and making storyboards, which I still do, and that is what I have enjoyed enormously in making animation films. In '68, I had a good chance of stepping into the private sector when Prasad Productions of Madras, at that time Chennai was called Madras, and they had just acquired an Oxbury animation stand and an Oxbury printer, optical printer, and they wanted to set up a special effects department first in Madras, but then I told them I wouldn't be able to come to Madras, but if they brought the equipment to Bombay, I would join them. And they brought the equipment here. It was set up in Film Center in Ahadev, and I joined them at that point. So that is my switch from public sector to private sector. And later, after about 4 years in Prasad Productions, then I decided to start my own company under the name Ram Mohan Biographics. And that I ran for about 25 years, right up to 1997. And then I joined Ronnie Screwar, UTV, who wanted to set up a studio, a much larger studio than what I had at that time. Because the idea was to get work from abroad and do outsourced work. And so from 97 to 2005, 2002 actually, I was with UTV, and we did get quite a lot of work from Canada and US and other countries. And also I had the opportunity at that time to train about 300 artists to work with us in UTV. We had a training program, and then we would take them into this production process and train them on the job. So that worked very well, and I'm glad to when I look back, I think it was very fruitful in the sense that though we did not use any did not make any original content based on original ideas or concepts. While working for studios abroad, for one thing, we were exposed to certain benchmarks, the quality that was expected for international use. So we train people to that level, and I had the opportunity of training a lot of people, young people, who were fresh people, freshers, people just out of school or out of art school, and train them. And later they turned out to be very good at their jobs. And today, some of the top people in the business, in the animation business, are, I think, people who were produced at that time. The character that I had created in 1990, that was the start of the decade of the girl child, and I made this character called Meena, and it was for UNICEF, and the films were meant to be used not only in India but also in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and other countries, SAARC countries, and a number of films were made using this character, and it was about the girl child in South Asia and the problems relating to the girl child. So it was about education, nutrition, early marriage, all kinds of issues related to the girl child. And I think this series was not only received very well in India but also in the entire region in which these films were shown by UNICEF. And that turned out to be one of the most successful programs, so, social communication programs that UNICEF had initiated. I personally feel that CGI, when it started, was quite, uh, it was very new, and there were not many people who could be comfortable with it. In fact, the feeling that we got in the early days was that CGI, as handled by our own artists, was looking very robotic and did not have the charm of classical animation. It had more flexibility, fluidity in its movements. But recently, the technology has been upgraded to such a level, and people also have become more conversant with the techniques and the production processes. And today, I think there's very good films being made abroad, uh, where the animation is as fluid and as graceful, as impressive as what old Disney animation used to be. Well, classical animation is a very broad term, but essentially we were referring to traditional animation, which is what Disney Studio used to do. It was one name that was known world over, and the quality was sort of a benchmark for everybody. We, we all aspired to animate like Walt Disney Studios, and uh, it was essentially character animation. But when it comes to experimental animation, it's not necessarily based on characters or tell a story about animals or birds and characters like that. But experimentation is usually more in terms of using the medium itself. The best example is Norman McLaren, where he used very different ways of producing animation. In fact, there are animation films that he made by drawing directly on raw stock, on negatives and also on prints and so on. And he could even animate sound by drawing on the optical track and things like that. So the experiment relates more to the technique of animation and using it frame by frame to produce effects. But today it is used also in other sense like is effects animation, which has now become the most popular, I think, widest application of animation in Hollywood as well as in India. Now is in effects, producing effects for films that actually have live characters, but there are a lot of special effects created by digital means. Animation institutions, there are quite a few, I think, that these came up in the 90s, 1990s, and later. But there are very few that provided the kind of training that, for example, I received when I was first trained in cartography. Because these are mostly uh, commercial ventures and the fees are very high, not affordable by most people, and the period of training is usually a year or two, and that is not really sufficient to get the students into a level of competence that they could use in a professional studio. So I find that many people who will go to these so-called institutes, they go through some tutorials, they are given a certificate and they are told that they have passed the exam. But the certificates are worthless because when you actually look at the portfolios that they have, the exercises that they have done, the quality is not always very high. Unlike what you find in studios in schools abroad. For example, I have seen people from the New York School of Visual Arts. The students' work itself is of a very high quality, and you know that they can easily be taken into a professional studio and they can provide the work that is acceptable even professionally. But this is not happening here often enough. But among the institutes that are showing promise are NID, of course, NID from Ahmedabad, National Institute of Design, and IDC in Bombay, which is attached to the IIT Bombay. And now there, students have shown promise, particularly, but the strength lies more in design, and the technique of animation itself is not fully developed by the time they pass out. When the new millennium started, the year 2000, when people wrote about what the new century is going to bring us, animation was one of the fields of creative expression that was hailed as the industry that's going to be a sunrise industry. And there was a lot of hopes among young people to take up this profession and show their expertise. But unfortunately, it did not happen. One of the reasons may be that the people who invested money in animation studios in India were more interested in earning foreign exchange by taking on outsourced work. And outsourced work sort of limited the area in which our artists could show their own skills because most of the pre-production was done abroad. The character design, the storyboarding, and the soundtrack and everything was done, and the package was sent to India for production. And the work that was done in India was the less creative aspect of animation. I wouldn't say it is totally non-creative, but still the scope they had for showing off their creative skills was limited. And I think that's the reason why we could not, when we were challenged, when there was a recession, and we were expected to make our own films and create our own concepts and develop them here and market them. I think our experience was sort of limited in the sense of creating original content, and that has sort of limited us, in the scope of work that we have done. Well, there are many things that can be done, but initially, I think in the eagerness to take on more students, our institute started taking people who were not really motivated, not really qualified. Still think that an initial training in an art school, the ability to draw, the hand skills, it's not really drawing because today they may be able to computers to create a model, but still the aesthetic sense that one develops in an art school, I think is essential, and that should become part of our curriculum. In fact, animation should be an area of specialization after the art school, either as a fine artist or as a commercial artist, an applied artist. One should have initially a very strong foundation in art. It's been very satisfying. I would say it has not always been easy. There have been many ups and downs. There were times when animation was not used as widely as it is at certain other times. But overall, it was a very good experience, and I was always eager to take in new technology whenever it was available, and also to take in people who were showed a genuine interest in animation, not merely as a curiosity to find out what animation is, but people who came from art schools with a good art background and who wanted to apply their skills to animation. I kept sort of an open house when I ran Ram Mohan biographies, and many of the people who worked with me at that in that stage of a career, I think they have been very successful. They have come out as main problem is that to become a national character of animation, it should be popular within the country of origin. Now that unfortunately has not happened in India. The main problem is that our people, movie-going public, the, they are more attracted by live actors and live stars, and we have never come out of that phase. In fact, animation is a demanding medium. When you are watching it also, there has to be a suspension of disbelief completely. In the sense, you are watching drawings or virtual models performing, and you should be able to accept them and to be prepared to enter into that world to experience animation fully and enjoy it. But that has not happened in India at all. I'm very surprised why it is so, because India has a rich tradition of storytelling through images, of drawings and puppets and so on. But today, our people seem to be indifferent to cartooning, animation, and they call it cartoons, and they say it's for children, and they don't seem to take it seriously. And somehow we have not found a means of getting people involved in watching animation and enjoying. I think there have been opportunities, but not as many as there should be, because in the first place, the education itself is not extensive. There are only few schools that take you to a very high level of proficiency. But other than that, I think the opportunities are also limited. But those who have done well and who have, particularly those who started out as traditional animators, 2D animators, and who switched to 3D and adapted to 3D technique, have done very well. And these people I have recently went to Prana, the studio in Goregaon, and I went and looked around the studio where they were working on planes too, and I was told that the work that is coming out of that studio is as good as anything that Los Angeles or San Francisco can produce. So definitely there are a lot of skilled people, but what we lack is opportunities. We don't really have very large studios and very large number of technicians who get the opportunity to do the work that they would like to do. We seem to be always in a hurry, particularly young people. Today they want to come out of school or college and get into a profession. That they don't have the kind of patience that is needed to really train themselves to the level where they can become really good creative people. And it's no use going to some institute and getting, say, 6 months of training in some aspect of production, getting a certificate, and fooling oneself into thinking that he has already become an accomplished animator. Animation and learning animation, becoming an animator is a slow process. It takes years of experience. There are quite a few people who had started their career with my studio at biography. I would say one of them is Geetanjali Rao, who has already won some awards abroad at Cannes some years ago. And again this year, another of her production is entered in Cannes. I hope she wins again. And then there is this young fellow who had just barely passed his high school, called Chetan Sharma, who is today proving himself to be a really talented and very good animator, and I'm expecting a lot of good work from him. I used to go regularly to my studio and spend my work time with my colleagues there when it used to be in Mahim. It was quite close there. But now they have shifted to a place in Oshiwara, which is too difficult for me to go every day. So I meet them only once in a week. That's all the time I spend my time here. I'm still in touch with a lot of my colleagues who have worked on that Meena series in from Bangladesh, in Nepal, and other people. And other than that, I do some sketching. I read a lot. I listen to music, and so on. More of a relaxed time that I find.